All right, so in this video, we're going to be doing a couple of things. We're going to be adjusting the player's jump so you can see that it's a little bit different now. It's a little more snappy and a little more responsive. Still not perfect, but I believe it's much better improved now. And we're also going to be adding this little pitfall trap here. So if the player steps on it, it's going to start flashing. And if the player, it's going to flash for a set amount of time, and then it's going to disappear, causing the player to fall through and hit the spikes if they do not move in time. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our new trap. So for us, I'm just going to keep it kind of simple, and I'm going to delete this one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just copy this platform and basically everything here. And then I'm going to do Control D to duplicate it all. And then with it selected, we'll move it and we'll just slide it over here. So it's kind of in the same spot, and we might have to move it here in a minute. And then I think that I'll remove the power up here from the first one. So we'll just go ahead and delete that. I'll leave all of the enemies. And then the one thing to make sure it doesn't look like any of our walls duplicated. It looks like we didn't select them. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of these, do Control D to duplicate those, and then move these over here and get them placed in the correct spot still. So now what we're going to do is for this one here, we'll go ahead and we're going to create a plank to put it over these spikes, and then we'll make it so it kind of flashes and then it'll disappear and the player will fall through it if they don't get off of it in time. So for that, we're going to use a 2D sprite object. So I'm just going to right click 2D object sprites, and I'm going to go ahead and use a square. And before we do anything else, we're going to need to make sure that we add in a box collider 2D to this. And we're also going to want to add in a rigid body. And then we're going to want to change this from dynamic to kinematic as well. And then once we have that set up, what we can do is we'll go ahead and we'll move this down here and go ahead and just make this, look kind of how we want it to look. I think we'll want ours to be kind of skinny like so maybe. And then I'll just move it down, have it below the ground a little bit like this. And then if we go over to the sprite renderer, we can go ahead and choose a color. I think maybe a little brownish color would probably make the most sense, like it's a plank of wood, for example. So we could do something like this. Maybe if we move it up just a little bit, and if we actually, and you can make yours look however you would like, but I think something like that will work for our purposes. Kind of looks like a little plank sitting there. And so once we have this set up, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go in and create a new script. So this one, we're going to go ahead and create and call, I'm going to call mine breakable, breakable ground. So now that we're back in our script, we'll go ahead and we'll kind of clean this up. So we'll remove these, and then we will also remove update because we shouldn't need it. And then we'll remove this comment here as well. So up at the top, we're going to need to set several different things. A lot of these are going to be serializable fields. So the first one is going to be a float. And this is going to be our break delay, we'll call it. And I'm going to set mine to 2 for now, so 2 seconds. And this is going to be the time that the platform will flash before the ground breaks. The next one here is going to be another float. And this one's going to be called our fall delay. And I'm going to set mine to 0.5f, so half of a second for now. And this is going to be the time before the ground falls after it's broken. The next one is going to be of type color. And this is going to be, we'll call this one flash color. And for now, I'm just going to set it to color.red. So just going to flash red. And this is going to be the color that the platform flashes after the player steps on it to kind of indicate that it's going to break. And then the last one is going to be, or the last one up here is going to be another float, and this is going to be called the flash interval. And I'm going to set mine to 0.1f. And this is just going to be the interval between the flashes. And that'll be it for the serialized fields. But then now we're going to need some private ones. And the first one's going to be of a type bool. And this is going to be called is breaking. And by default, this is going to be set to false. So this is going to be a flag to indicate if the ground is in the process of breaking or not. The next one is going to be private, and this is going to be of type sprite renderer, and I'm just going to call it sprite renderer. And do that. That's going to get us a reference to the sprite renderer component. And then the next one is going to be private, and this is going to be of type color, and I'm going to call this one original color. And that's going to be the original color of the sprite, so what it starts out as. So now down here in start, we'll go ahead and we're going to get those components and store the original sprite color in the start method. So our sprite render, that's going to equal our get component with this component of the sprite renderer. And then we'll do pretty much the same thing here with the original color. But that's going to equal the sprite renderer dot color. So that'll grab the color that the sprite renderer currently is, and that's going to store that for us. So now we're going to need to do a on collision enters for when the player collides with the plank, if you will. So we'll do private void, and this is going to be a on collision enter, and make sure you do 2D since we're doing a 2D game here. And then the first thing that we're going to want to do is an if statement. So in here, we're going to say if the collision dot game object dot tag, and we're going to say if that equals, and then our player tag, so equals player. And we also want to say and is not already breaking, so we're going to say exclamation point and then is breaking. So that's going to say, so this is basically saying we're going to check if the collision is with the player, and if the ground is not already breaking, then what we want to do is we want to set is breaking equal to true. So that's going to indicate that the breaking process has now started. And then we're going to want to do start coroutine. And in here, we'll type in the name of our coroutine, and we haven't created this yet, but we're going to call it flash and break, as that's what it's going to control. And so we'll still have the red error because we haven't created it yet, but we'll do that now. So that's what the collision is going to do. If we collide with the player and it's not already breaking, we're going to set it to is breaking is true, and then we're going to start this flash and break coroutine. Now for the coroutine, what we can do is we'll do a private. This is an IE numerator, and this is the name of it, so flash and break. So in here, we'll need to set up a couple variables. So the first one is going to be of type float, and we're going to call this one elapsed time, and by default, it's going to be set to 0. And so that's going to be, we're going to initialize the elapsed time with that. And then the next one is going to be of a type of bool, and this is going to be is flashing. And by default, we're going to set this one to false. So that's going to be a flag to indicate the flashing state. And then next, we're going to need a while loop. And so in here, we're going to say while the elapsed time is less than the break delay, then we're going to want to do something. So this is going to do a loop until the elapsed time reaches that break delay that we have set up above. And the first thing is we're going to want to toggle the sprite color between the original color and the flash color. And we can do that by saying sprite color.color. We're going to say is or equals is flashing, and just how it popped up here with the question mark. And then we'll say flash color, colon, or what's that, semicolon, original color, colon, and then original color, and then we'll put our semicolon at the end there. So that's going to toggle back and forth between them. And then we're also going to say is flashing, and that's going to equal is not flashing. So that's going to toggle the flashing flag. And then next we're going to do a yield return, and we're going to do new wait 4 seconds, and we don't want the break delay. Oops, we want the flash interval. So that's going to wait for the flash interval, and then the elapsed time, and then we'll say, oops, plus equals the flash interval. So that's going to increment the elapsed time for us. And then once we do finally hit the break delay time, we're going to want to go ahead and do the sprite renderer.color, and we're going to want to set that back to the original color. So we're going to make sure it's the original color after it's done flashing. And then we're going to call a method here that we will set up in a second. It's going to be called break because that's what it's going to do. So here, once we've reached that break delay and once we're ready to break, then we'll call break, and we will break the plank. So now for this, what we'll do is we'll create that right below here. So we're going to go ahead and do private void break. Oops, and we don't want that. So private void break. And then what we'll do is, for us, we're just going to keep this simple. So we're going to do the sprite renderer, and we're going to say enabled, and we're going to set that to false. So it's no longer going to be enabled. So that's going to hide the ground tile by disabling the sprite renderer. And then next we're going to do get component. And we're going to do the component of box collider 2D, and we want to say dot enabled, and we want to set that one to false as well. So then that's going to disable the collider to make the ground so nothing collides with it anymore, which will allow the player to basically fall through there. And then next we're going to want to do an invoke here, and inside here we're going to want to invoke the fall, and we'll want to do that after the fall delay. So we're going to call invoke the fall method here after the specified fall delay that we had. And then again, we don't have the fall one created, but we'll go ahead and do that now. And that's going to be pretty simple. So private void fall. And all that we need to do in here is get component of rigid body 2D dot body. Oops, forgot the parentheses, or dot body type, and that's going to equal the rigid body type 2D dot dynamic. So that's gonna make the ground tile fall by setting the body type to dynamic for us. And then if you wanted to, like in the break method up here, this is where you could add like visual effects or things like that. So if you wanted to play an animation for your plank where it actually breaks and snaps in half or something like that, this is where you could call that here. For us though, we're going to kind of keep it simple, and back in our editor, we'll click on the square, and then we're going to want to make sure we add in that script. So breakable ground, we want that added on here. And then once we have that added, I think it's a good idea to make this, we'll go ahead and actually change the name first, maybe to, like plank, or we can call it breakable plank, I think is a good name. And then we'll add this into our prefabs in case we want to use one again down the line. And I'm actually going to move this into our environment here again, just to keep it organized, as well as all the spikes like so, just to keep it so it's nice and simple. And might even add in all of this stuff as well, just to kind of clean it up a little bit. So now if we click on play, we should be able to run to this plank over here. And actually, if we step on it, it flashes. A couple things happen there though. We couldn't jump off, which was unfortunate. And also our run animation wasn't playing when we were moving. So to fix those, we should be able to do that pretty easily. We come in here, remember we have to have this set to the ground layer. So that has to happen. And hopefully that actually just fixes everything for us. So we'll go ahead, we'll jump back in here and try that one more time. So now if we run in here, it's flashing, we can jump, we can still move, all of those good things, which is what we'd want. But if you can see that if the player didn't jump in time, they fall down and they'll get hit by the spikes. So that's working how we would expect that to work. So one other thing that I want to do in this video is actually fix the player's jump. I feel like it's just not as smooth as it can be, and it feels kind of weird playing with it at the moment. So let's hop into the player movement script here, and we're just going to need to add a couple of things in here to make this feel a little bit better, in my opinion. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to adjust the jumping power here, and I'm going to adjust it from 8 to 16. So I'm going to double that. And next we're going to add in 2 different multipliers here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add in a float. And this one's going to be called the low, we'll call it low jump multiplier. And by default, I'm going to set this one to 1.5F to start. And then we're also going to want to add in another one. And this one I'm going to call the fall multiplier. And I'm going to set that one equal to 3.5F to begin with. So the low jump multiplier, we're going to use this to adjust the gravity when the player jumps, but they don't hold the jump button. And then the fall multiplier is going to be used, we're going to use that to adjust the gravity when the player is falling. Next, we're going to head down in the script to our set player velocity, and we're going to add some additional functionality in here. The first thing that we're going to want to do is, I had a typo here. I didn't make the V uppercase, so I'm actually going to fix that. So I'm going to click into this, and then I'm going to go ahead and just press Control R. And if you press that twice, it's going to pop up here where you can edit it. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that to make it an uppercase V, and press enter, and that'll change all references of this word. So next we're going to want to do an if statement here. And we're going to be saying if the rigid body's velocity, so rb.velocity, and we're going to say if the y.y, and we're going to say if that is less than 0. So that's going to mean that the player is falling downwards. Then we're going to want to do whatever we put in the line here. And then we're also going to come down here and we're going to do an else if, and in here we're going to say rb.velocity.y, and this time we're going to do greater than 0. And we're also going to add something else in here. So we're also going to say exclamation point, and then we'll do keyboard dot current dot space key dot is pressed. Oh, and then we'll need to put an and in here. So this is going to say or else if the velocity.y is greater than 0 and we are no longer pressing the keyboard. So the keyboard or the space key is no longer being pressed, which is our jump key. So if that's no longer being pressed, then we're going to do something else. So what we're going to do in the first one, so if we are going down, so if the velocity is less than 0, what we want to do is we're going to say rb.velocity, and we're going to do a plus equals, and then this is going to be a vector2.up, and we're going to multiply this by our physics 2D dot gravity, dot gravity dot y, and we're going to multiply that as well, and that's going to be multiplied by our fall multiplier -1, and then we're going to multiply that by our time dot delta time. And this line is essentially saying that we're going to add an additional force to the gravity that gets multiplied by the fall multiplier here, -1, whenever the player is falling. And this is going to create like a faster falling speed for us. And then for the next one here, we're basically going to do the same thing. So I'm going to copy this and we'll paste that down here. And the only difference that we're going to have for this is instead of the fall multiplier on this, this is going to be the low jump multiplier that we created. And this is going to allow a shorter jump for the player once they release the jump button mid jump. So if they only hold it, if they don't hold it long enough to reach the top of the jump, then they'll end up having a shorter jump. So this should make it a little bit more fluid here. Now back in the editor, one other thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to go into the player, and we'll need to go into the player movement script. Or I apologize, we'll need to go into the rigid body 2D here, and we'll adjust this gravity scale. I'm going to adjust mine to 5. So we'll do that. And then if we press play and we try out our new jump, we should see a pretty substantial difference here. So he jumps up and he comes back down. A lot more fluid, I guess, if you will. I can't like jump up and then go across the whole screen how we could before. So it can still use a little bit of work, but I definitely think this is a good improvement and a good start on getting the jump working a lot better. So it's still not perfect, but maybe we'll adjust these values a little bit and we'll mess with some things in later episodes. But I just wanted to make this work a little bit nicer here. So overall, I think that's going to be it for the video. We did a couple things. You know, we fixed the jump, or made the jump feel a little bit smoother and a little bit better. And we also added in the pitfall trap here. So if the player runs and jumps on it, it will end up disappearing after a short time. So that's going to be it for this video, and thank you for watching.